All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the channel. I'm Brian Lusk. Thank you for joining me today. I'm just waiting for the for everything to kind of settle in from hitting the start streaming button here, and I'm keeping an eye on things. So thank you again for joining me for today's Ukraine update. It's been a few days since we've done an update. I've had a very busy real life happening right now. I've had one son who is on a church mission managed to break his collarbone, and they're now talking about how to deal with that, and a daughter who received a church mission call. So we're pretty excited about a bunch of things going on, amongst many other things at the moment. So it's been very busy around here at the Lusk household. Now, speaking of being busy, well, Ukraine wasn't any less busy. In fact, they were far more busy. So my little problems are nothing to really get all that bothered about. Let's go ahead and jump over here and take a look at what's going on across the board. Now, this is old information right here. Good stuff to start off with, just to kind of get things settled in a little bit. Ukrainian intelligence officers back in August of this last year actually managed to hike more than 600 kilometers into Russian territory to destroy some Russian Tu-22 M3 bombers over at Soltsi Air Base. Now, during this operation, one of their number was killed, Lieutenant Colonel Ola Babi. And I'm certain I've mispronounced that one, so I do apologize, but I'm trying my best here. The soldier in question had already conducted several successful operations in that area. At this time, they just did not. They got spotted and had some bad luck, for lack of a better way to say it. Really interesting. Sorry to hear about Lieutenant Colonel Ola here, but overall, it looks like he was really working hard to carry out his mission and managed to apparently pull off that part of it. They've now put up a plaque in honor of this man here. Your father is a hero, and you are the son of a hero. It's he's leaving behind a 7-year-old son. Yet these are the type of people that are fighting for Ukraine right now. They're the ones that are aggressively doing everything they can to try and make sure Ukraine stays free. Let's move on to the situation over in St. Petersburg. You remember in the previous video, we talked about a drone attack on that city. Well, now they're installing S-300 defenses around the city, including this one right here, where they had to block the roadway trying to get it turned around. That's after, I might add, a Russian Novatek gas plant took it in the shorts. Multiple drones hit it and halted operations. The reports are that it's going to take months to get that terminal back into operation. And the damage was pretty extensive. Here's some more information on that. They're putting these S-300 complexes everywhere, but this is one of those closing the barn door after the horses have already left situations here. So it's clear that Ukraine managed to pull one over on Russian air defenses. And overall, what does this tell us in the long term here? What it tells us is that Russia's air defenses deep inside their country have been stripped to send those facilities farther, closer to the front and away from the areas that are vital to be protected. That's why Ukraine has been able to get their drones, hundreds of kilometers into Russian territory, because they have not had air defenses at these vital locations. Now, they might have some over at the Kremlin, but the Kremlin is not all of Russia. In that same vein, Ukrainian forces reportedly conducted successful drone strikes against targets in Leningrad and Tula Oblasts, where repeated Ukrainian drone strikes may fix Russian short-range air defense systems, defending potentially significant targets along expected flight routes. But one of the biggest complaints we've been seeing from the Russian side is, where in heaven's name is our air defenses? Why haven't they been shooting these drones down for the 300, 400, 500, 600 kilometers before they ever get to Moscow, get to St. Petersburg, get to these far-flung areas where there's vital military resources? Well, that's part of Ukraine's intention. If they can fix those air defense systems near Moscow and St. Petersburg, they're not on the front lines protecting Russian troops. Sorry about that. Had a choke for just a second there. Hi, Douglas. Glad to have you aboard. Thanks for joining me today. Hope that things are nice over in Colorado. Over here, the temperature's been coming up a little bit, so we're around freezing, but not sub-zero like the last time I was doing a broadcast. How are you doing today? I'll be watching for comments over there, by the way. There have been a lot of explosions and fires reported overnight deep in the Russian rear areas as Ukraine has been aggressively sending drones into the area. They've got the port of Ust-Luga in the Leningrad Oblast near St. Petersburg. They've also got additional, let me see, the Novatek is the one they're talking about here. And other attacks were reported in Tula, Smolensk, and Oryol Oblasts, targeting infrastructure critical to the Russian military. Glad to see it, Douglas. Glad that you're doing well. I hope in future streams to kind of take 5 minutes at the start, just kind of talk for a little bit, and then and greet people as they come in, including you, obviously, and kind of make it a little bit more personal and interesting. But that's for a future stream. But yeah, we're talking serious areas here. Tula was one of Russia's biggest weapons-producing areas back in World War II. As far as I understand, they're still heavily involved in weapons production there, and that would be a lot of nice, rich, juicy targets that Ukraine could potentially hit with drones. Over in Smolensk, they apparently have been targeting the aviation plant as well, which was also hit overnight. They've been denying casualties or property damage, but they do that every single time. More of the pictures and related information on that. There was another drone attack on an oil terminal in the Bryansk region. Bryansk is pretty close, so pretty easy to target, relatively speaking. And 2 Russian servicemen were injured as a result of a drone attack in the Kursk region. Then there's news that came out today, just a couple of hours ago. One of the largest Russian oil refineries is on fire in Tuapse, which I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciation of. I'm not familiar with it. Here's a video of the fire over there at the Tuapse oil depot. And they're reporting in this fire is getting enormous. This is I believe, one of the oldest oil depots in Russia. And they've got a lot of fire coming in on it, and really this is a big blow to Russia. As War Translated says, Tuapse Special Military Operation Zone. There were sources that, by the way, excuse the language on the video here, there were sources claiming they saw flying objects that were going into the area, and that's what triggered the explosions. More drone strikes there. And here's a variety of videos of the situation here. Let's see if I can get some of them pulled up. Fire trucks responding, several dispatch. Let's go ahead and forward this here. And there's a video of the fire itself. It's clear they hit a lot more than just workshops and administration buildings. Another view of the fire there. That looks like it's pretty impressive. None of these are extremely close. This is probably the best one right here. You can see it over the center guard there. There we go. Clear view of some of the fire taking over this facility here. Russia definitely is going to be hurting after this one. Again, this strike happened just today. We're waiting on analysis on what was actually struck and how badly damaged it is. But if it's nothing else, it's visually impressive. Then there's the big news of the day. Just today, Russian news claims that an Il-76 aircraft was shot down over Belgorod while carrying 63 Ukrainian POWs. They've retracted the story and reposted the story. Ukraine says the plane was transporting S-300 missile systems, or missiles for the S-300 system. And that is actually likely to be the case, and I'll kind of review the evidence with you real quick here. There's been no confirmation that there have been POWs in the plane crash, although the Russians have been claiming it, but nobody is in a good position to confirm it. Immediately upon this aircraft being shot down or crashing, I'm not going to claim it's shot down just yet, Russia demanded a meeting of the UN Security Council. That tells me something right there. This feels planned already, because the A-50 that was shot down just a week ago, still nothing's been done about that. But all of a sudden they are ready and roaring to call a Security Council meeting over this one within hours of the plane being shot down or going down. He claims that there were Ukrainian POWs on board and that all 65 were killed, along with 3 Russian officers and 6 crew members. I can believe the crew members and I can believe the Russian officers. But the Ukrainians have stated that Russia did not tell them that there were POWs in an aircraft around here. But let's keep going here. There's more to this story. There was a prisoner swap planned for today. That prisoner swap did not get carried out. Kind of skipping through. I had a lot of duplicate information here. President Zelensky has requested an international investigation of the crash. Now, interestingly enough, the Ministry of Emergency Situations was working the crash, and they were told to get lost, and the military took it over. One more red flag that there's more to this than meets the eye. Here's some of the crash site right here. The interesting thing about these pictures is that there's no signs of, there's actually 2 bodies that were in the area. Not enough to justify a count of 65. This was all videotaped and everything. They actually caught the aircraft in the middle of its breakup and as it went down. So while they didn't get the actual triggering event, they did get video of the actual breakup. Now, quoting Jason J. Smart here, journalist from the Kyiv Post, right before this all happened, Belgorod said it was under risk of a rocket attack. This is not a common warning. Usually, Russia avoids even sounding their air raid sirens at all. So to have them announce something like this is unusual. Then, by 11:24, it was announced the plane had crashed. 11:25, they announced there were Ukrainian prisoners on board. It only took them 1 minute to say that right off the board. Then they had a list of prisoners that were supposedly on board, but at least a dozen to 2 dozen of the names on that list were in fact previously swapped prisoners, not supposed to be associated with this prisoner swap. And as he concludes that it looks like a bungled psyop that the Russian is trying to do to justify doing something against Ukraine. Now, here's more of the video was reportedly at the crash site. It does show 2 burned bodies by the aircraft. The place was geolocated. Now, the plane itself was leaving Belgorod, not flying to Belgorod. Let me address some things that I have more information on later. This plane, just today, landed in Belgorod from Iran. It flew from Iran to Belgorod. When it took off from Belgorod, it wasn't headed towards Ukraine. It was headed away from Ukraine. Now, that alone is not necessarily proof of anything. But coming from Iran to Belgorod right before is nothing like a prisoner transfer, unless Russia has started stashing their prisoners in Iran, which would be in contravention of a variety of laws of war. So overall, we're looking at a situation where the numbers are really quickly not adding up. There were no fragments of bodies or the whole plane construction on the photo from the crash site, but the explosion looks like a detonation, and it was a massive one. It was a big explosion. Now, of course, if the aircraft was fully loaded with fuel, you could get much the same explosion, and that is likely to be the case. But overall, it's interesting. Now, this is the rest of it here. Anton Herashchenko states that the several large objects fell out of the plane or were dropped, and now the Ministry of Emergency Situation has been kicked out of the site. So the only thing that's left is the Russian Ministry of Defense. There's no civilian oversight of this crash site. So there's no way to check what they're seeing, what they're recording, and what they're planting at the crash site. Some Russian military correspondents reported that usually prisoners are not transported by aircraft in Russia, usually trains or special vehicles. This all looks like it is a setup for Russia to try and justify something. The call for the UN Security Council meeting nearly immediately upon the plane crashing really is a big tell from what I can see. 17 of those on the list of POWs that were identified were already exchanged earlier this year, and therefore that list that was released was unreliable. Now, Ukraine has been a little bit circumspect about this. They say that they were not informed of a prisoner transfer vehicle, like an aircraft, being made use of in this situation, that the plane in question was transporting S-300 missiles, and they noted that the transport aircraft in 30 kilometers of a war zone cannot be safe. They do, now Igor Shushko puts it a little bit more clearly. The rumor of Ukrainian POWs being on board the plane is false. And here's the additional information on the plane coming from Iran. So overall, we're looking at a situation where the plane came from Iran. It was likely loaded with missiles. The odds of it being then loaded with POWs for a transfer and then taking off in a direction away from Ukraine are low to nearly non-existent. I'll let Ryan Macbeth talk about the proper wording on how to put that in their official analysis. This is not an official analysis. This is just my opinion. So overall, that's the situation on this plane. Russia's claiming there are POWs on board. Ukraine saying that there were S-300 missiles. And that explosion certainly looks pretty impressive for the reported contents. No signs of a bunch of bodies. There's some real evidence out there to put the Russian story in question. That was the big news of the day. I'm going to go ahead and continue on into Ukraine news. If you have any questions, absolutely pipe up, let me know. Also, be sure to sound off if you're just showing up so I can know you're here. And be sure to just go and give me some chats here. I'm watching. Russia did carry out another massive air attack overnight. That would be not last night, but the night before last. They hit Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Pavlograd, with pretty much residential buildings and other civilian objects having been hit. Ukraine is calling for more air defense systems to try and cover the gaps. Leopard 1A5 tanks are actually getting very good reviews by Ukrainian forces. They have a positive opinion of the equipment, and it looks like that everything is working pretty well. In many of these cases, the armor of the vehicle just needs to be stout enough to just stop things like rocket-propelled grenades and other light attacks, because most of the things that are above that point are going to be either main tank rounds or they're going to be landmines that are going to destroy the tank regardless of how heavy it is. According to a poll conducted by independent analytical platform Vox Ukraine, found that 63% of Ukrainians who left the country because of Russia's invasion had returned by July or August 2023. 64% of the respondents who have not yet returned to Ukraine do have plans to return, and that 27% will return to Ukraine. It's clear that there's going to be issues with going back home for these guys. There's going to be housing issues. There's going to be employment opportunity questions. But overall, it looks like about 6.2 million Ukrainians are living abroad due to the war. From the Defense Intelligence Update from the UK, Ukraine's ports exported more agricultural products in December 2023 than at any other point since Russia's invasion. This is a real indication that Ukraine opening that Black Sea corridor is really the vital piece to keep their economy moving in this particular situation. Here's an interesting one that I think I've got a little bit more detail on in here somewhere. President Zelensky signed a decree recognizing some Russian territories as historically inhabited by Ukrainians. There's a map, I think, in here somewhere. Let's see if I can find it right here. Perfect. They have put this decree as just to develop an action plan to preserve the national identity of Ukrainians in the Russian Federation. Now you can see the areas in red that show that that extra area where Ukrainian used to be actually one of the primary languages, if not the primary language. So while this is not them grabbing land, it's just them acknowledging that there were Ukrainian people in these places, such as Belgorod and and these areas around here and Rostov-on-Don. Of course, Russia threw an absolute hissy fit and claimed that this is proof that Ukraine was after their territory. If they were after Russian territory, I think they would have published this well before February 2022. Picture of some of the aftermath of the attacks in Kyiv yesterday morning. There we go. You can see it's not looking. There's definite damage there. People are suffering in their capital city because of the attacks by Russians. The largest state flag was unfurled in Lviv on Ukraine's Unity Day. Now, Unity Day is an interesting little deal. This is the unification of the east and the west of Ukraine coming together as one country back in 1919, as I recall. The day is an interesting historical landmark. Shows that Ukraine has been around for longer than just since 1991. Plus, there's been signs of Ukraine going back to hundreds upon hundreds of years. Russia claimed that Ukraine had shelled a market in Donetsk. Well, somebody did a little bit of calculations. They watched the video and they did some mathematics where you heard the report of the gun and the impact of the shell. With the amount of time that it traveled, it meant that the shell was fired well within Russia's controlled territory. So this market in Donetsk was shelled by Russian forces. And likely it was done on purpose in order to carry out a false flag operation. That is the type of people that Ukraine is dealing with on a day-in, day-out basis. They'll shell their own, or at least the ones they claim as their own, to get a justification to do even more nasty things. That is a pattern that Vladimir Putin has gone through time and time and time again. The reason they went into Chechnya was because they claimed that Chechen terrorists had bombed Russian housing complexes. Turned out that was actually carried out by Russia's FSB, not by Chechen terrorists. They've used the same exact pattern for Chechnya, Georgia, and now Ukraine. This is their way of expanding their territory. Speaking of Russia, let's go ahead and continue to move on here. Russia continues to weaponize its position on the UN Security Council to propagate several long-standing Russian information operations. They basically call these meetings so they can preach to everybody about how evil Ukraine is and how wonderful Russia is. That's all there is to it. They're using Western institutions against the West. It's that simple. A electrical substation in Vladivostok exploded, leaving 100,000 people without electricity. That was yesterday. The situation with Russia's infrastructure is getting progressively worse as they overload their systems and overload, honestly, systems that have been in place for 50, 60, even 70 years that have not been maintained properly, especially because of bribes, graft, and corruption. A new candidate has proclaimed himself the anti-war candidate in Russian elections. Basically, he's going to get on to the ballot so that he can be the official. See, we showed you that people can vote for their anti-war candidate over here. He'll get about 1.5% of the population that's against the war. That means that everybody else supports the war. This is the same exact tale every single time. When he asked if he thought he could win, he said, "No, I'm not an idiot." So there you go. Now, Russia did put out a recent, I don't remember if it was a paper or policy position or law, but they stated that they were basically calling the sale of Alaska to the U.S. illegitimate. So therefore, they want it back. So the U.S. had better be paying attention. Russia is advertising who they are. They're advertising their intent. They want it all. Russia is now beginning to seize the financial assets of people who are against the war. This is really intended to be something that's going to deter and silence critics of the war. Oh, the opposition candidate, by the way, got his 100,000 signatures to get on the ballot. Now, my understanding is that they worked really hard to get those signatures, but you can see people queuing up to go and sign up for it. I can't imagine that the election system in Russia will allow him to get anywhere close to the levers of power. Russia's claimed to invent new invisibility cloaks. They say it's fundamentally new camouflage that can shield soldiers from thermal imagers and outperform existing variants. But there's no details. Considering you can actually hide from a thermal imager with a tarp by placing it and not getting your body up against it, it'll be entertaining to see what they come up with as their new technology. Interestingly enough, humanitarian aid for the Russian military was found at a landfill in the Donetsk People's Republic, thrown out and then buried and rolled over with a bulldozer. There was, in fact, even a big box of things like letters and drawings from Russian school kids that were intended for the soldiers. Which should tell you exactly how much Russia cares about their soldiers. Humanitarian aid packages being just dumped into a landfill, including letters from little kids. A Russian plane dropped an aerial bomb on a dam in the Belgorod region. Once again, Russia is bombing its own territory. This Fab 250 aerial bomb fell into a reservoir near Ionovka, there we go, on January 21st. At least that's when it was discovered. The dam was partially damaged, but there were no casualties. According to Crimean Wind, employers in the Russian Federation have begun to hire miners more often due to a shortage of personnel. So if they can't send them to the front, they're going to send them to the coal mines to mine things and do the work. A Russian hacker collective, Nebula, attacked 2 Russian gas companies that work with the Russian government. They left a message saying that their network could be restored if they denounce Putin and his war. Oh, yeah, and here's the bit about the hand-picked opponent for the March presidential elections in Russia. Do you plan to win? Of course not. Do I look like an idiot? Yeah, he does not want to win. He is just their controlled opposition. Let's go ahead and move on to the situation on the international front. Now, things are a little more disorganized than normal today just because of the amount of time I was trying to go through things. The Turkish parliament has approved Sweden's NATO membership, and that means Hungary will be the last country to do it. Now, Orban over in Hungary might try and use it to get some extra favors, but let me see if I can find it real quick here. I'm going to quickly skip through this because there's something really interesting here. Bear with me. You're kind of getting a little advance notice. There we go. Hungary states they support NATO's accession. That's one bit. Where's the other piece? Come on. Man, this is not as neatly organized as I normally would have things. Interestingly enough, and here it is finally, Hungary requested negotiations regarding Sweden's NATO membership bid. And Sweden said no. There's only one reason Hungary would want to negotiate with Sweden on their NATO membership, and that is so they can extract money or concessions from Sweden. It's that simple. There's no other reason for Viktor Orban to want to negotiate Sweden's membership personally and as a country. When Sweden said no, I'm pretty sure that kind of knocked him back on his heels a bit. He's not used to being told no. But between the European Union finally saying, we might just start pulling your voting rights, and now Sweden saying, we're not going to sit down at the table so you can try and get us to pay you money just so we can join NATO. It looks like Viktor Orban's power may be finally waning just a touch. All right, let's go back to what I was doing here. The United Kingdom has announced they will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. That's why they're raising their military aid to £2.5 billion this year. NATO announced that they have signed a contract for the supply of 155mm artillery ammunition worth $1.2 billion, part of which will be delivered to Ukraine. This is a joint production agreement type situation. The overall order was made on the behalf of several allies, and who will either transfer those shells to Ukraine or use them to replenish their own stockpiles that they've already sent. Oddly enough, NAMO, N-A-M-M-O, Europe's largest ammunition manufacturer, which is a Finnish-Norwegian kind of a venture there, closed down their production of critical ammunition because of a strike. Odd timing, this is. That'll be because of delay of some deliveries at this extremely critical moment. And the Russians are still leading every battle with artillery. They're getting shells from North Korea in bulk at this point in time. They're going by ship and by rail. And yet, all Russia has to do is gin up a little bit of a labor shortage to knock Western plants offline for a while. The U.S. ambassador to Hungary visited the new symbol of European money fraud and corruption in Hungary, a canopy or treetop walk built in the middle of nowhere with no trees. So they built this entire platform, and it's a whole operation here. It reminds me of the so-called bridge to nowhere up in Alaska, and where a boondoggle type situation, or the Big Dig. The truth is, this is just a way to bilk money out of the European Union, and Hungary's getting good at it. Germany's going to deliver 6 Sea King Mark 41 helicopters to Ukraine. Now, these are 50-year-old Sea King helicopters, but they're being decommissioned and replaced. They'll get some pilot training, and then they'll be able to use it to patrol parts of the Black Sea. The head of the General Staff of Norway is calling on the citizens to prepare for a possible war with Russia. He says that the country has a window of opportunity that could last 1, 2, or maybe 3 years, during which defense spending should be increased. But we are running out of time, he said. I just want to emphasize this. We don't know what will happen to Russia in 3 years. It is important for us to face an uncertain and unpredictable world with strong national defense. Robert Fico over in Slovakia had said that life in Kyiv is absolutely normal. He was actually being asked why he would meet with Ukrainian Prime Minister over in Uzhhorod instead of in Kyiv. And Fico said, do you really think there's a war in Kyiv? You're not serious, I hope. Life is absolutely normal there. Tell that to the kids doing their schoolwork in bomb shelters. This is a report that North Korea has now become Russia's top weapons supplier. So that means that they're no longer limited by Russia's ability to manufacture shells. The U.S. Treasury Secretary has reassured the Ukrainian Prime Minister on $11.8 billion of budget support from the United States. They're committed to securing that $11.8 billion in a direct budget support as part of a national security supplement. Prime Minister Fico from Slovakia has said they will not block European Union aid to Ukraine, which is a change of tune for him. Now, he has blocked direct, not charitable, but direct aid to Ukraine by the government. But he has said that the arms manufacturers and the facilities are welcome to set up their own deliveries of shells as long as Ukraine is paying for it. Ukraine and Poland have discussed creating 4 additional border crossings. With the repeated protests happening on that border, it's going to be good to have some additional crossings set up so that they are less likely to all be blocked. Canada has announced they will now a new donation of 10 multi-role boats from Zodiac Hurricane Technologies, worth roughly $20 million. They're also going to provide civilian instructors, planes, and support staff within the F-16 training coalition. Go Canada. Ukraine has received another medevac helicopter from Poland. So that's a new add to their fleet over there, their air fleet. Now, we've mentioned several Nordic countries and Baltic countries talking about needing to potentially be prepared for a war with Russia coming soon. British Army General Sir Patrick Sanders has warned United Kingdom citizens to be prepared for a war on the scale of the great conflicts of the 20th century, and that they themselves may need to mobilize. This is Britain. They're not exactly on the line with Russia, but they're looking at a potential World War III situation, and they're saying that British citizens better be prepared. So General Sir Patrick Sanders said the situation in Ukraine is similar to 1914 and 1937, and that only citizen armies will be able to defeat the coming onslaught on the West's way of life. And just in case Russia didn't think that we were paying attention, the United Kingdom has sent to the UN pictures of North Korean shipments of arms that were going by boat to Russia. So they're using that rail line and they're using boats to get these armaments over to Russia now. That should tell you about the volume of arms that North Korea is sending. So go ahead and move on to the front lines here. But before we do that, I'm going to take a brief break and get a drink of water. Hi, Casman. Welcome aboard. My personal opinion is it's a very valid statement right there. Look at the situation as we're seeing right now. We have a major power that is making belligerent moves. They've had rhetoric saying that, oh, if you just give us this, we'll be satisfied, which sounds like something right out of World War II. We have other powers aligning themselves with this major power. That usually in ways that are meant to undermine the order of things in the rest of the world. You have other situations seem to be provoked by allies of that major power. We're looking at Iran at this particular case. Iran is in the middle of trying to get the Houthis armed and keep the Hamas militants in business long enough to cause some real problems over there. They're disrupting global trade down there. So we're looking at a situation where we have allies of a major power working to overthrow the current order of the world. Sounds like something right out of World War II. And by the way, welcome aboard. Glad to have you here. Did that answer your question? Do you have any additional questions on it? In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the front lines, and absolutely, I'll be watching, so please feel free to comment. I'll be watching for it, and I'll just continue on so we don't have dead air as we go. The situation over in the front lines really has not changed much. Most of the changes have come from Avdiivka or Marinka area. We'll get into those in detail. But overall, you'll note that there's still attacks and defense happening all the way from basically all across the front lines. Krinky continues to hold. No changes over here near Kupiansk. The situation there, Bakhmut, seems to have settled down. No major changes in some time. And same thing with Verbova and Robotna here. There were some changes last week, but nothing in the recent numbers that have been listed. There is reports out of Avdiivka that Russian troops have reached the southern edge of Avdiivka. They have geolocated footage showing this. So let's go ahead and jump straight into that situation here. As of 2 days ago, Russia managed to advance into the southern private sector, moving to Sarska Ota Soborna Street, while also securing the adjacent area east of in the direction of the industrial zone. The Zenit army base near the M30 remains disputed, though Russians are present in the area. That's the area on the southeast of Avdiivka. Ukrainian forces did manage to regain some positions in that area in the private sector and force the Russians back a bit on the 23rd. This will be on actually from the 22nd, but reported on the 23rd. The area around the Zenit air base has been clarified and is mostly back under Ukrainian control. There is Russian presence still to the south of it. There is a additional advance near Pervomaisk. Nothing that really changes anything in that area, but it does mean that Pervomaisk is gradually getting flanked. There is reports of gains by Ukraine in the area of south of Chervone, near Marfapil. Now, this is a new report here as of today, so I don't have it on my actual maps here. Let's go see if we can find out where this is, Chervone. None of these are correct. Let's see if I can get some other markers there that'll tell me where that is. Malinivka. Let's try that. Whoops. Get back here. Malinivka. Kharkiv. Zaporizhia. There we go. That is not it. That is definitely not it. Well, I am not sure exactly where on the lines it is. Oh, right there. Why didn't it show up the first time I searched for it? There we go. So this is the area we're looking at right here. This is the Verbova Robotna area right here. Over here is Marinka, where Russia is still making additional progress. So we're looking about in this area right here, some additional advances on the part of Ukrainian forces. Not a lot, but it is a couple of tree lines and I wouldn't say it's super significant, but at least it's moving forward. And of course, Marinka, additional progress there. That's pretty much it on the front lines. Not a lot of major changes. So that's the long and short there. Let's get into some of the extras. We did a little magic, how Ukrainian partisans seduced Russian soldiers, then poisoned them. Now, this happened over in Mariupol. There is a significant There's a significant partisan movement in all of the occupied areas, and this is one of the reasons why I'm sharing this. They put together a profile for an imaginary, beautiful woman on Vkontakta. Vkontakta. There we go. And that's the Russian social media network. That's where all these Russian soldiers are looking for their brides and things like that. They added some poison to a vodka bottle, and then arranged a sale of that vodka. Apparently, that's one of the things that the Russian soldiers have been lacking because they've been forbidden to buy it. So they managed to get this all set up. 3 soldiers were killed and more than a dozen others taken ill. The buyer was basically thrown into a pit and told to give up the cellar. But the problem is that this is winter. All the cellars are going to be bundled up with, hats and scarves and big thick coats. There's nothing they can do. And as they say, as for the fake social media account, the phone they used is already at the bottom of the Kalmius River. So that's an interesting little side note on how the Ukrainians are tricking the Russians into negative situations. Now, you are probably familiar that the United States military has many M2 Browning machine guns. This is a design that predates World War II and was a John Moses Browning design, in fact. And this 50 caliber machine gun is on pretty much every U.S. tank, tracked vehicle, anything that they can stick a gun on ends up with a 50 cal somehow or another, an M2 Browning. Well, this group actually used it to shoot down one of Russia's fancy KH-101 cruise missiles. Isn't that pretty slick? I mean, I wouldn't have expected to be able to do it with a M2 Browning machine gun. It must have been just right there on the trajectory. A Russian KH-101 missile ended up not exploding near Kyiv. The residents found the missile warhead and called in the experts to get it out of there. As they say, if the bomb had gone off, their building would have been a trench, not a building anymore. There's no words to go with this one. From Defense of Ukraine, animals always trust kind people. This one caught my fancy and made me laugh. The perfect cup of tea needs a pinch of salt and a squeeze of lemon, says U.S. chemists. And, of course, the response from The Guardian is, a scientist from the country where you can find tea made with lukewarm water from the tap claims to have found the recipe for a perfect cuppa. So, of course, the U.S. Embassy in London had to issue a press release. Today, and I'll just read this to you, it is beautifully written here. Today's media reports of an American professor's recipe for the perfect cup of tea has landed our special bond with the United Kingdom in hot water. Tea is the elixir of camaraderie, a sacred bond that unites our nations. We cannot stand idly by as such an outrageous proposal threatens the very foundation of our special relationship. Therefore, we want to ensure the good people of the UK that the unthinkable notion of adding salt to Britain's national drink is not official United States policy and never will be. Let us unite in our steep solidarity and show the world that when it comes to tea, we stand as one. The U.S. Embassy will continue to make sorry about that. The U.S. Embassy will continue to make tea in the proper way. By microwaving it. Oh, gee. And of course, the Cabinet Office of the UK had to respond saying, we must disagree wholeheartedly. Tea can only be made using a kettle. And that's everything for today. Thank you for joining me. I'll just pause here for a moment to see if there's any questions before I shut things down on the stream. I do really appreciate it. Thought the ending there with the tea controversy, which is always a controversy, let me make no mistake, that the ending with the tea controversy might be a particularly fun way to end today's video. By the way, thank you again for joining me. I do appreciate it. It's been really busy here the last few days. Thank you, Douglas. Glad you made it here for today. And always glad to have you on board. It's been really busy over here. I mentioned early on that my son on a mission managed to break his collarbone. Kid needs to stay away from bicycles sometimes, at least when he's trying to race them. And it's just been a pretty crazy over here. And I do appreciate your guys' patience and for your showing up when I'm finally able to get a stream going and share all the news. And on that note, thanks again. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next stream.